Across America, something surprising is happening. Young people are returning back to Christianity. For years, surveys showed that faith was fading, but recent data actually tells us a different story. According to Pew's research, 62% of US adults now identify as Christian, and that share has been stable in recent years. That means the long decline may have slowed or flattened. So what's going on here? For decades, we were told that everything can be explained by science, technology, and material wealth, but more young people are realizing that materialism actually leaves them empty. We're entering this age where you see spiritual atheists, you see people who are kind of on the fringe of deism who are entering into this idea that the material world is coming to its end, and it's coming to its end because it cannot encompass everything. We realize that there are things beyond what's in the physical world that motivate us. There are subtle bodies in motion that move us, that help us define who we are. There's something beyond the physical world. So it actually turns out this realization is having real impact. A recent Barna report shows that young adults, Gen Z and millennials, are now attending church more often than many older generations. Gen Z churchgoers are averaging about 1.9 weekends per month, while millennials sit somewhere around 1.8. That's an upward shift since the pandemic lows. Our secular culture promised freedom, happiness, and progress, but instead we've gotten the exact opposite. Actually, many young people are experiencing isolation, division, anxiety, despair. I do believe that the good news is that when the world looks dark, faith is actually seen as a lifeline. All right, now getting back into the data, Barna also found that belief in Jesus has risen. As of 2025, 66% of US adults say they have made a personal commitment to Jesus, up a full 12 percentage points since 2021. And this is good news. If the number is 66%, I do believe America should look like a better place. And it's not that right now, but it's better that people are coming back into the church than walking away. And at the end of the day, as young people, we're realizing these material things aren't filling us. The secular world isn't giving us what we were promised. Hookups, drugs, partying, the basic things, right? Like you hear it all the time. They don't work because we're using secular categories and we're trying to shove them into a God-shaped void. And these things just leave us more and more empty. It's like when you're sad and someone says, you can't be sad because you have all these good things. That makes it worse. When you have beautiful things, if you have wealth, if you have a nice car, if you're well off and you're miserable, that almost makes it worse in a sense. Because you have everything you think you need, but there's something that's missing. That's like the silver lining of our culture, is that people can see the contrast between, the light and the darkness. And a lot of people do come back to the church. Christianity has been under attack by politics and culture in recent years, actually. Not recent years for like 2,000 years, but it's amplified now. Everything from media criticism to public controversies. Instead of pushing everyone away, some of these pressures are actually making people pause and think, why is faith being challenged? What is Christianity really about? And these moments of crisis often become turning points for people. Charlie Kirk, he was assassinated in cold blood and he was martyred for his Christian faith. He was killed because he was Christian. His Christian values led to that assassination. And it's a horrific thing. But I've seen in my personal life, I've seen anecdotes in comment sections, and I've seen people publicly proclaiming that that is what it took for them to say, you know what, I'm going to return to the church, or I am going to commit my life to Christ. And we had this beautiful thing embedded in the history of Christianity. Martyrdom actually waters the seeds of the church, and more people convert. And it has this inverse reaction. You would think that people would want to walk away or scare Christians from living out their faith. But throughout all of history, it's done the exact opposite. It's caused millions to rise up and convert. And there's something known as red martyrdom in ancient Rome. The Christians would go out of their way to be persecuted. They would go out of their way to be killed because that's what it meant to be a Christian, to die for your faith. And that was an honor. And finally, when Christianity was legalized and they weren't under extreme persecution, there's a thing called white martyrdom, and people weren't being persecuted. And a lot of Christians, ironically, were actually kind of, I don't want to say bummed out, but they were confused. Like this was a new stage in Christianity for them. The faith was going to look a little different. So they would go to the desert, and that's where you get guys like Saint Anthony the Great. That's where you get the beginning of the monastic lifestyle. They were like, okay, well, we're not going to be physically killed, so now we have to die to ourselves. And a lot of people in our culture are starting to feel that way. Really, white and red martyrdom. We have to die to ourselves because the culture is so perverted and everything is so amplified. But there's also this possibility that we're heading towards the future where people are going to be martyred for their faith. And as ironic as it is, this political and cultural pressure is causing more people to turn to the faith. People also are beginning to see the differences in lives lived devoutly. Peace, joy, stability, and purpose. These aren't just ideals, though. Many young believers report that their faith gives them meaning that secular solutions could never do. I've seen it in my own church, I've seen it among my friends, and even the polls reflect it. When church attendance among young adults rises, it usually pairs with those reports of spiritual fruits. And that's because young adults are now engaging in the gifts of the church. They're engaging in the sacraments, okay? So some of these fruits are going to look like marriage, confession, a devout prayer life, reading scripture, receiving the Eucharist. All right. The list goes on and on and on. Works of charity, love, kindness. And that's only natural because when you come into the Christian faith, those are the ideals that you're supposed to embody. And when others who are not in the faith, when others who are living in the darkness see people who are joyful, happy, and have this peace that they cannot attain, they want that peace. And that's why it's so important for us as Christians to live our life as devout as we can, because we are a walking testimony. We are a walking witness to others of what the faith has to offer. And we come up short every day. It's why people don't want to come to the church. We can be the most evil, cruel, wicked people. And it's like if you have to choose between that in the secular world or that in the religious world, but it's also hypocritical, those people don't want to come into the church. So we have to continue to hold ourselves accountable so that people will keep coming in because they see the fruits. Eternity is back on the table, boys. All right. We are so back. Eternity is back on the table. So this means we've been told to live for today. But there are questions that are deep in people's heart. Questions of eternity. What's real beyond this life? And what happens after death? These are questions that no amount of success or likes on social media are ever going to fully answer. I know it sounds pretty surface level, but it's true and it needs to be said over and over again. The church has always held these answers, and people are beginning to look beyond this life. We spend hours, days, weeks, sometimes even years preparing for a vacation, but we don't take a second, not even 1 second, to prepare for the afterlife. Eternity is just a question that's going to plague us as long as we're here. People all the way between the glory days and the golden years are still harboring these questions, and that is a big reason why people come back into the church. Eternity is not something we want to mess around with. It's just a serious consequence where you end up. You want to be in total communion with God for the rest of your life or your eternity. And people start to think about that. And sometimes it scares them, sometimes it excites them, but we want to make sure that we end up together and that we can all experience the beatific vision. Loneliness has actually become one of the biggest crises in America today. The U.S. Surgeon General recently called it an epidemic of loneliness. Surveys show that nearly half of young adults report feeling seriously lonely on a regular basis. Social media promised connection, but instead has left many people feeling isolated. The church offers something unique: real community, face to face relationships, people who will pray with you and stand with you. That's exactly what many young people are looking for: a place to belong, not just a place to scroll, and more young people are finding that in the church. I've actually seen this myself in my own church. I've seen a lot of young people come in. I see it in my comment section. I see it with people I talk to. People are longing for community. I hear it all the time. I've tried everything else. I want community. I want the fulfillment of all desires. Not exactly the words people use, but it's what we're feeling. These stories are echoed in the data that I've been presenting. Young people aren't just attending more, but they're actually expressing renewed commitment to the faith. So is Christianity actually making a comeback in America? I would say yes. It's also very conditional. I want to be careful how I choose my words here, but I would say there's two main factors for that. There's the fact that we live in America, which gives us the freedom to choose, the freedom to go into the church in the first place. But we also have this weird relationship with the darkness, with the political violence, with the emptiness of the secular culture that almost pushes us into the church while simultaneously the light in the church also draws us in. So conditionally speaking, we live in a really good time for people to have the right mixture of both worlds to go into the church. And if this video resonated with you, make sure you leave a comment below, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I can't wait. I've got a lot more coming.